Hello, my name is Dragonblitz, and this is my submission for a GDQ 2020, and I will be submitting Castlevania Symphony of the Night Randomizer. This recording is of a run I did very recently. It is being played off of PS2, off of a backup disc, so it is played on console. This is available on console, and it's not too terrible to set up either, but without further ado, we'll just get into it. Neat little thing about the randomizer as well is that the seed name is displayed at the top during this screen. This would be a great way to allow for a donation incentive for the marathon to donate for the seed name. It is displayed on screen, and it gives a little bit of interactivity between the stream chat and the donators, as well as the actual stream itself. Really cool little thing. But yeah, Symphony of the Night Randomizer. What is randomized in this game is going to be your starting equipment, as well as all item drops that you find either through enemies or on the ground through breaking pots or whatever. The other things that are randomized are relics and other means of progression, excluding the gold and silver rings and spike breaker. Those items are not randomized, that way they are in set locations. That's just to allow actual progression to move forward without randomly stumbling upon items that are required for progression. The category that is the most popular for the randomizer is glitchless plus spike breaker. And the way that glitchless spike breaker works is that you are playing through the game without using any glitches to get past any like progression points or anything like that, and you're also requiring that you collect the spike breaker armor before collecting the silver ring. It's a little arbitrary, but it allows for very interesting routing decisions. Otherwise, the routes would become pretty similar and get stale, because you're able to get the silver ring quite early on without using any glitches, but just by using invincibility abuse to get past a spike hallway. This allows for more dynamic routing, and it also is more in line with the developer's intent as to how to complete the game. Starting off here, I start with the shield rod, which can be used in combination with other shields, but the shield that I happen to use is not very useful here. So, also starting off, unless you find a library card, there is no glitchless way to skip death. So most of the time, the starting equipment isn't too important outside of just being able to maneuver around the first minute or so of the game. Yeah, here I take a couple of hits just due to the fact that my weapon that I'm using isn't able to one-shot these wargs, so it's a little bit more difficult to take them down. If I was given a better item, I'd probably be able to kill them in one hit. There I open the menu there to see if I started with a library card. So doing certain acts at the start of the game, playing as Richter in the prologue, give you items at the beginning in a vanilla playthrough, and those items are also randomized. So there is a chance, a very slight chance, that one of those randomized items that it's given to you in place of either the neutron bomb or the heart refresh could be a library card, and that would allow you to skip death and keep all of your equipment. Here are two guaranteed drops at the start of the game. Those items are normally the short sword and red rust, but because they are randomized into the pool of those skeletons. So instead, they dropped a pentagram and Darkblade. Darkblade's actually quite a strong weapon, so I got pretty lucky here, starting off with quite a good sword. Sometimes you will go minutes, tens of minutes maybe, before finding a good enough weapon to kill enemies consistently in one hit. Normally, if you're used to seeing vanilla speedruns of this game, you start off with Alucard's sword mostly, because we usually skip death in most speedruns. So you start off with one of the strongest swords in the game, but in Randomizer, it's not that likely that you go off starting off with like a really strong sword. Here you're going to be seeing me go into certain areas that you wouldn't see in a speedrun normally. I'm doing some item checks here. Each one of these areas drops an item, and I'm hoping for something useful, something good. It could be any item in the game, so just hoping to get lucky. There I didn't really find anything of use, but yeah. A lot of the items are either like food items that you can use to regain health, or they're just like worse iterations of weapons that I already have at this point, because Darkblade is quite strong, so But they're always worth checking in case you get something as, you know, useful as like a duplicator, or mana prisms are another item that we're looking out for, because in tangent with duplicator allows us to use like more advanced movement without worrying about spending up all of our mana and having to refill it at a save point. Coming up here is the first boss fight. It's Slogar and Gaibon. Starting off, you cast Tetra Spirit. It helps you just do more DPS while I wail on them with the sword. Funnily enough, I got the double level up animation that happens when you kill them one frame after another. It's quite rare. Just a neat little thing that happened this run. We'll keep it moving. Forgot to update the tracker here. So far I've collected the Eye of Vlad, which is one of the items used for progression. There I got lucky, one of the bloody zombies dropped Dracula's Tunic. Dracula's Tunic is one of the better armor in the game. It has really good damage resistance, as well as it increases your attack by a slight amount, so most of the time if I see something like that, I'm going to equip it. And in general, like most items that you find in this game, like I personally like to load up on as much attack possibilities, I guess, as possible. Like I want to give myself as much attack as possible. Here we're going down through the Marble Gallery to do another relic check. There's a couple of item checks along the way. You see me do this jump, and so I can see in the top right hand corner if there's a good item. Here that sprite is either of a meal ticket or of another or a library card. Library cards are very useful, and you saw me there kind of like go a little bit down the stairs and then turn around. From the bottom left corner of the screen, you can make out a tiny bit of what that relic is, and based on what that sprite is, it determines whether you go down there to check or to grab the relic or not. So it's just a way to check the relic without having to necessarily do a lot of extra movement. It saves quite a bit of time. But yeah, at the beginning of the game, there is a chance, if you're given a relic that allows you to progress, where the routes can split at this point. Without any form of progression relics, which I haven't gotten any yet, the route is pretty much set in stone. You're going to be going from the beginning of the castle all the way to the outer wall. From the outer wall, you can go into the library, which has a few relics. There is one relic sitting in the outer wall behind a elevator. So I believe starting off there are 5 possible relics that you can collect without any other progression relics. One of those relics is guaranteed in logic to give you some form of progression, some relic that will allow you to progress, whether it's a transformation, which gives you a dive kick. Being able to dive kick gives you the option to dive kick off of candles and get into other areas that you wouldn't be able to previously. You'd be able to check one relic in the Castle Keep. You get one relic in Colosseum, as well as one more. Hold on. There we go. Here I'm doing another item check. It's not useful, so I won't come back for it. Coming up is the fight with Doppelganger. This fight, normally, if you see it in a speedrun, we have a clock, a stopwatch, and we're able to use that to freeze Doppelganger and just wail on him and kill him very quickly. Because we don't have Cube of Zoe, there are no items that spawn from candles, and because of this, we're not able to have access to a stopwatch, so we're just gonna have to fight him straight up. There is an AI loop that you can do, where you just kind of jump backwards, and then like maneuver forward and then slash at him. He falls to the ground, you just do it over and over again. It's a pretty safe fight and not much to worry about. If you do corner him though, he will do a wing smash at you, and that is quite difficult to avoid. This jump is somewhat difficult. It requires you to use the 7 frames that you have while falling off of a platform to still jump. It's one of those things that a lot of platformers have that allows jumps to feel more lenient than they actually are. So yeah, you have to abuse those 7 frames in order to make that jump. Here we're doing more progress. That sprite there is that of a familiar. All the familiar relics have the same exact sprite, and none of them are useful for progression, so in general we skip all of the familiars. Here's a quick way to check what that relic is. It was a monster vial, which is not very important. Here I'm opening up this teleporter. This gives me access to using this teleporter later on from any other teleporter. When you use any teleporter for the first time, the teleporter back to the castle entrance is always available, so I'm doing that now, which allows me to open up this shortcut later if I happen to come back here from the other side and want to use a teleporter. So we're just going to teleport our way back now. And from here, we'll be moving on into the long library. The long library, you have 2 item checks that you can do without any other progression relics, and then there's 2 more that require some form of progression relics. You need some way to gain height, whether it's through dive kicking or whether it's some form of flight, in order to check one, and then the other one requires that you have mist, because there is a mist gate in the way to check the other relic. Yeah, starting off, sometimes you don't have a shield either. So you're just going to be seeing a lot of backdash chaining instead of shield dashing, which you see normally. This is the most important progression relic for the most part. The bat. It allows you to move fast. It allows you to use the wing smash. It also just gives you flight, and flight allows you to go almost everywhere pretty much at this point. It opens up a lot of relic checks, and it opens up a lot of different route possibilities. And then another very useful relic, Leapstone. This gives you the double jump, which can be chained into a dive kick, which can be chained into transforming into the bat. Gives you a lot of forward momentum while also transforming, so you're using that transform time to actually move forward. Demon card is sellable in the shop, so there's always going to be a randomized relic in the shop, and all of the items possible to buy in the shop are randomized. That's why you see me scrolling through the menu trying to find useful things. This seed is nice in that mana prisms are able to be bought, and they're only $200, which is very, very cheap. It's the cheapest item value possible. So in a seed like this, it's important to find some sellable items, which are going to be just gems, and when you sell them, to use that to buy a handful of mana prisms. You can buy enough, especially for at the price of 200, you can buy enough to where you will not have to buy any more, and you'll have more than enough to use freely throughout the run and refill mana and wing smash as much as you want. And the reason why it's important to refill your mana is because this wing smash move right here that I'm doing that allows me to zip across really quickly, that costs mana. If you look in the top left hand, that bar is going to go down every time that I use that wing smash move. Oh, also while I was in the shop, I bought a shield, which will allow me to shield dash. Speeds up movement by a little bit. So yeah, right now, 2 very good progression relics so far with the bat and the leapstone. Here, I'm going to go back up the way that I came a little bit. Oh, right there is a glitch. I know that this is a glitchless speedrun, but that glitch is unavoidable. It happens, it's frame perfect, and if you get a level up or acquire a relic on the same frame that your mana ticks up, because your mana will tick up slowly over time, and it'll actually, like, there's an animation where it fills the bar. And if it fills the bar on the same frame that you've paused the screen with some sort of level up or relic acquiring animation, then what ends up happening is that it never stops filling up your mana until the very end of that animation. So yeah, it's pretty much, you can't try and go for that glitch purposefully. So it's not like banned or anything like that from the category. It's just pretty much random whether it happens to you or not. It's effectively random. Here I did one relic check in the outer part of the clock tower, and now we're inside the clock tower to progress into the outer wall. Tried to do a damage boost off there, but my armor is actually too good. I'm used to being under equipped at this point in the game, so you would get damaged a little bit farther back. The amount of knockback you receive is based off of your defense level and how much damage the enemy does to you, which is quite interesting. Doing some more item checks over here. Yeah, magic missile is not a very useful item, so I just go ahead and skip it. Here I'd wing smash in this room as opposed to the room prior, because if you wing smash into that hallway, there's a chance that you just will bonk. And grabbing a library card is very good. Library cards allow you to teleport back to the shop that I was just at, and it just saves you a lot of backtracking in a lot of areas. There's a few areas that save more time than others to use library cards, so usually you save your library cards for those areas in particular. Here I go for some more item checks. And I'm also going to be using the save room right here. This is the first save that I've used this run, so it forces you to actually save the game and go through this animation every single time. But saving the game refills all of your HP and refills your mana, and if you happen to die or reset the game, you will restart from that point. I go up here because there's a lot of really good item checks that you can do. I believe it's like 8 items. Yeah, 8 different items, and I pick up a couple of useful ones on the way up here. Oop, somehow fell down there instead of collecting the items over here. Okay. So that's usually a good, if you are still looking for some powerful items to kill bosses with or to do damage with, or just for utility, whether it be mana prisms, library cards, stuff like that. That's usually a good item check. This is another room with 4 items, and Jewel of Open. Nice. That is a required relic in order to complete the game. The Jewel of Open blocks off a couple of areas. There are these blue glowing doors that you can't get past without Jewel of Open. Specifically, it blocks off your access to the underground caverns, as well as access to the Silver Ring. Those are the 2 most important ones. Here we got Form of Mist, which is useful for progression as well because it allows you to unlock another relic behind the Lesser Demon fight in the library. There I picked up Cube of Zoe. It's an optional relic. What happens is that allows for items to spawn from candles, and that can be useful because without it you can't get sub-weapons, and sometimes candles can drop large amounts of money. What drops from candles has been randomized in the randomizer, so sometimes you'll find yourself with a really good candle. God's Garb is the best armor in the game, so I go out of my way to pick it up. I don't remember if I put it on this run or not, since I already have Dracula's tunic, which increases attack, and usually I prioritize increasing attack over having good defenses. Okay, castle entrance. I believe this is where I do the first save split. So in Randomizer, it's usually very beneficial to save the game and go for a relic check. Yeah, I do the save split here. Okay, so the castle entrance is kind of far out of the way, and there is a relic at the top of the castle entrance. And what a lot of runners do, and what I'm doing here, is you make a save point. Here I do a couple item checks while I'm here to see if there's anything useful. And when I check the relic, if it's something that I need, I'll just keep playing. But if it's something I don't need, I will soft reset and then play from where I previously had saved, so I don't lose as much time having to backtrack. Save splits are useful in a couple of areas. This is one of the better ones, as well as a couple places in the underground caverns. Usually you just want to save split when you have to do a relic check that's quite a bit out of the ways. And another thing is, because I don't have infinite mana or infinite mana prisms, backtracking would take quite a while. Okay, it's the Merman statue, which is another required item to do a specific relic check. And if the relic behind that area that the Merman statue opens up, if that relic is required to beat the game, then that means the Merman statue is also required. If you see the bottom row of the tracker that I have on screen, you have the eye, the heart, the rib, the ring, and the tooth of Vlad. Those are all required items in order to unlock the final boss fight. So those items are usually in the vanilla version of the game only in the second castle and only dropped by certain bosses. But because it's randomizer, it can be any of the relic locations. So here I stop back at the save room, refill my mana, and now we have 2 relic checks to do in the alchemy lab, which we were already at the beginning of the game. But now that we have the ability to fly, we're going to be able to check 2 other relics. Also on the second pass, there's usually a couple of items that I'll check if I have the ability to fly, just because it speeds up those item checks. Here I'm not shield dashing because breaking those pots actually causes a lot of lag. Okay, Rib of Vlad, that's a required relic, so I'll check that off on the tracker. Yeah, I was a little nervous, I guess, about breaking those pots open. They cause quite a bit of lag on the PlayStation version. If you're curious as to why all those have a turkey sprite in them, they actually just don't drop anything. Those pots usually have a lot of sub-weapons available to them, but the developer of the randomizer decided that it just wouldn't be fair for people, especially if they're playing Richter, the Richter mode randomized, to go into that room and just have every possible sub-weapon available to them from that point, as opposed to finding them randomly throughout the game. So it was just a balance thing. And it's also quite funny to just see a bunch of turkeys floating in jars, but... Okay, on to the next relic. This is Gas Cloud. It's a optional relic, but it can be useful for just utility as well as killing certain bosses with certain item combinations. So if it's not too slow to pick up, it's usually worth grabbing, especially if you don't already have like a massively damaging weapon. Here I'm going back because I thought I saw something useful. I thought it was the duplicator, but it turns out it was only holy water. Because I was flying by so fast, it was difficult to tell. Holy water is one of the better sub-weapons anyways, so it's pretty much worth getting. There's one boss in particular, Akmadon. He dies very quickly from just holy water usage alone, so that takes care of a boss fight that can be quite annoying otherwise. Oh, I think this is the one run that I did where I made a small routing error and I realized it a little too late. Yes, because this door opens and closes, the statue to the left on that room opens and closes every other minute, and I opened the menu to check in-game time how long before it would close. I thought I had enough time to do this relic check, which was a required relic, so I grab a required relic, but I don't have enough time to make it back and progress, so I decided to do some item checks over here. Not very useful items, which is unfortunate, but... So I missed my opportunity. Like, that statue would have closed on me no matter what. So instead of just waiting an entire minute for it to open up again, I decided to do a small detour to do a couple things that I'll have to do and come back to later anyways. There's a door that you have to get past to open a switch that allows you into the underground caverns. So I'm just going to do that now and make it back in time for the next statue cycle. It lost me about a minute overall compared to alternate routing of this area, but routing decisions like that are difficult to make on the fly, so... And because I'm still going to make the cycle, I decided to do an item check right here, pick up the ice brand. I don't think it would be necessarily that particularly good unless I find an enemy or a boss that's weak to ice, which off the top of my head I can't think of. Maybe I thought it was like a different item based off of the sprite, because all you have is the sprite to look off of, so maybe I thought it was a different sword. But in general, yeah, ice brand's not really that good. But yeah, with these combinations of relics, I have the means to check pretty much any relic spot I want, so it's all a matter of finding the most optimal way to maneuver around the castle and check relics as well as pick up required items. So this is an area that I could have gone to earlier, but it's just optional. This area is pretty much required because it has it's a crossroads for a lot of different relics, and just it allows you to move through the castle very quickly. There is a teleporter to the right side of this area. Looks like this guy was giving me a lot of trouble. The floating swords can be very annoying, but there's a teleporter in this area that I will come back to later, because it's very useful to have a teleporter in the center of the castle that connects to a lot of different areas. Here we're able to check and see what the relic is through this mist grate. I see that it's a the Heart of Vlad, which is a required relic as well. I unfortunately run out of mana there, so I go back to refill my mana and then use it again, because transforming into the mist takes up some of your mana. And there is the Heart of Vlad. So at this point I only need one more Vlad relic, which is the last relic required to open the final fight with Dracula in the second castle. So there are seeds where all 5 Vlad relics will be in the first castle. Those are quite rare, but there are a lot of seeds where 4 out of 5 are in the first castle, or 3 out of 5 are in the first castle. Very rarely do you see seeds where only 1 or maybe 0 are in the first castle. So here there's a couple item checks that I can do. I grab this garnet because I can sell it later and then buy all the mana prisms that I want, which is really nice. Normally I wouldn't do these item checks, other than the only reason I'm doing them is because I have the bat and this area. There's 2 save locations to refill your mana, so it's not a big deal to use up a lot of MP to go fast. Here I pick up the Moonrod because it's situationally really good against certain bosses if I don't have better weapons for them. I don't remember using it necessarily, but there's a life max up. I think I grabbed that on accident just due to the movement that I already had done. Wow, luckily enough I got a Moonstone drop. Moonstone is really, really good. It boosts pretty much all of your stats during the in-game night cycle, and the in-game night cycle starts, if I'm remembering correctly, it's from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. The game starts at midnight, so you would need to be playing the game for 8 hours in game time in order for it to switch over to daytime, and this game doesn't take 8 hours to complete. It doesn't take 8 hours to complete 100%, so you'll never see the in-game be daytime pretty much in a speedrun scenario. So Moonstone is almost always useful, where its counterpart Sunstone, which does the same thing but during in-game daytime, is never useful in speedruns. It will never be used, because you should never be so slow that it's daytime. Oh man, these floating swords are really giving me the business today. Okay, we get past there. Now we go on to the underground caverns, which is where I wanted to go in the first place. But I realized not opening that teleporter to the to Alrox's quarters would cost me in the long run, especially because this statue opens and closes every other minute. It can be quite punishing to not go there on the proper cycle. Having to wait there for the full minute is pretty bad. There are a couple scenarios where you pretty much are forced to go through that area, and having to wait the full minute is like worst case scenario. If you're lucky, you'll have library cards to mitigate that, because the library is relatively close to a teleporter that you can use alternatively, as opposed to the teleporter in the Alrox's quarters that's behind the statue. So here we're going into the underground cavern, and in this part of the underground cavern, I'm going to find the Succubus boss, which is the gatekeeper for the gold ring, which is required. I don't remember why I grabbed the Goddess Shield, but here I do grab the Moonstone because they do stack if you wear 2. So I will get a boost to all of my stats twice as good as just a singular Moonstone equipped. You have 2 different accessory slots that you can equip stuff with, so I use both of my accessory slots for Moonstones. Yeah, it gives me like almost 10 in every stat, which is really good. So yeah, made very quick work of the Succubus fight. It's not a very difficult fight. She doesn't have that much HP in general, but if you don't have a decent weapon to kill bosses with, it can be annoying. Here I don't have the gravity boots, which are a very useful item for going through vertical sections. So I have to do some awkward movement with the bat to get through here. So we fall down this shaft down here. Get to a save room. Here we do another save split. This save split is for another relic coming up. So if this relic isn't good, we just reset and come back to this point. So this section, you have to wait for this guy on the boat to reach a certain part of the section and before a door opens. During this, you have time to kill bats, which dropped a rune sword. It's not a great weapon, but it's a unique weapon in its own right. But it gives you a chance to farm for item drops off the bats, and there's a couple of item checks that you can do in this area as well. There's a total of 4. I've already seen 3 of the items so far, so it's just a matter of riding the boat. And yep, that's the door that opens up. Here I'm doing my last item check. It was a max health up, which wasn't useful. Ooh, the item was gravity boots. It's not a required item by any means, but it's so versatile and good for movement in general that it's usually worth having. Yeah, it looks like at this point in the stream I was having some issues and some frame drops, but that's unfortunate. Okay, so we save again because there's another save split coming up. This same save room is used for 2 separate save splits. You only have to save a secondary time if the first relic you check is useful. So here's a couple more item checks. This area can be quite trolly with the frogs and whatnot. They're one of the harder enemies to dodge. More items that spawn under the bridge that you can check out on your way over here. And then another item down there, not useful. More items to check under the bridge. I go back to grab this garnet because it can be useful to be sold later. Another item check, not a very useful item. Another item check, and then this guy we don't have to wait for his boat ride. This relic in particular doesn't have like a requirement behind it, so do another item check down here. It's Mystic Pendant, which is a pretty good item. It allows your mana to refill faster on its own, but it's not worth keeping and maneuvering all the way back to the area that I just was at, so I do a soft reset there. So I grabbed it in the case that it would have ended up being very useful if I required that relic from that spot, but as it turns out, it wasn't a required relic, so. It's very important to do every single relic check in the first castle. By the off chance that all of your Vlad relics, all 5, are in the first castle, which is a possibility. I mean, everything is 100% random, so you can't guarantee that. Well, it's random within logic, but it is within logic for all 5 to be in the first castle. So you want to do every single relic check if you can. There are situations where you don't have access to certain relics, which are required to get to other relics, and then it becomes apparent that one of the progression relics is still in the first castle, but you have to go to the second castle in order to get a relic to go back to the first castle in order to progress. That's like the worst case scenario and the slowest possible scenario, but there are strategies that you can employ to mitigate the amount of time lost from that, like making sure you open up enough shortcuts and teleporters to all the areas that you need to. So we go to the abandoned mine. In the abandoned mine, there is a relic check that you can do. It's where the demon card normally is, and it also connects to the underground, or the catacombs, sorry. And the catacombs are where you're going to find the Spikebreaker armor, and the Spikebreaker armor is required for this category. So here's that relic check that I was talking about. That was Echo of Bat. It's not useful at all. You don't need the Echo, even though we go through the spike room in Glitchless Spikebreaker. That's the Fist of Tulkas. It's a pretty powerful weapon, so I pick it up just in case. It can be situationally useful for bosses. I don't remember if I actually end up using it or not, but there's tons of item checks you can do here in the catacombs. There's 2 items off to the left right here. It's a bat pentagram and a max life up, so not useful. I leave. Refill my mana here. I think in a marathon setting I would save, because there is a somewhat risky maneuver coming up that I'll kind of let speak for itself. So, or I guess I can start explaining it now. There is a room in the game that's required before getting to the Spikebreaker that's just covered in spikes. It's a hallway just completely covered in spikes. And so trying to maneuver through that hallway is very difficult, and it's completely dark, so you can't see what's going on. But there's a setup that we can do here that allows you to wing smash through the area, take 1 hit of damage, and then continue on. And it's called the Blind Spikebreaker room, or Blind Spike room. It's a trick that's pretty much only found in Glitchless Spikebreaker randomizer runs, so it's pretty neat overall. Especially because the Spikebreaker armor is required. We have to go to this area. In every other category, speedrun wise, the Spikebreaker is not required. So 1 more item check, and here is where we use our 1 library card that we had earlier. It's very slow to get out of this area, so it's faster in general to use the library card. And plus, with this library card, I can now go to the shop and buy those mana prisms that I wanted to buy earlier, which will speed up my movement by a decent amount. And I also got a diamond, which is really rare, but that's great. So here I'm looking for those mana prisms. I go with 35. That should be more than enough for the rest of the run. I just double check through some of the items to make sure I didn't miss anything else that could be very useful. Nothing else is good, so I just move on. Equip those mana prisms, because in general, like, you don't really need to use combat to kill any enemies. You only need to be you only really need to equip weapons to kill bosses. Everything else you can just get through with wing smashing and not worry about. These are item checks that I really only do if I'm still in need of like a couple of boss killer weapons. Here there really wasn't anything useful, so I just move on. But yeah, the later into the run that you get, the less item checks in general you end up doing, because you're getting closer and closer to having all the weapons you need in order to beat the game. This is where I switched to the Fist of Tulkas, because I realized it just does slightly more damage than the Dark Blade, which is what I was using before. Here I'm trying to do the that attack right there. It does a lot of damage. You stay floating midair. Can be useful against certain bosses that like to fly around. Do a couple more item checks, and just need to get past this mist gate. That's the wolf relic. It's not really useful at this point. It's only very useful early on in the game. So. Oh, had a hard time finding my mana prisms, so I just maneuver my menus around so that way they're at the top. Very easy to find. So that's most of the relics checked in the first castle. I think the only area that I have left now is Alrox's quarters, which I already have a teleporter to go to check that area out. also need to acquire the silver ring and the holy glasses in order to get to the second castle in the first place. In order to save Richter as opposed to killing him and getting the bad ending, you need the holy glasses to free him from his spell that Shaft has put on him. So just progression stuff. And that stuff's always set in place. You'll always acquire the holy glasses in the same spot. You'll always get the gold and silver rings at the same spot, and you'll always get the spike breaker at the same spot. So we're able to route around those particular areas, and then you just route in the relic checks that are close to that area. Oh wow. I got very lucky here and found a duplicator. Duplicator allows for all use items to be used infinitely. So later on, you're going to be seeing me use Buffalo Stars. Those are normally items that you throw once and then they're gone. Here is where I equip them, yep. They're very high damaging and they're meant to only be used once, or however many you have. You use it and then you lose it. But with the duplicator, you can use as many as you want. Very, very powerful, very useful. You could also use them for movement like shield dashing, because the animation of backdashing can be cancelled with throwing an item, similarly as with pulling up the shield. Yeah, you can see here, his first form, Auroch's first form, was very quickly dispatched with Buffalo Stars. Throw some into his back, and he is dead. That boss fight can be particularly annoying if you end up going here early on. He has quite a bit of health, and he's resistant to a handful of things. I think he's resistant to like fire attacks and a couple of other things. So that boss fight could be annoying. I'm already here, and there's it can be useful to have Power of Mist. It just allows your mist to be extended indefinitely, or for however much mana you have. You'll just be able to stay in mist form, as opposed to it just being like a short burst thing. Another Dracula Tunic drop. Here I use spells to open up the secret area here, because it's more convenient. There's the Echo of Bat, which we is normally required to get through the Spike Breaker room. So yeah, we'll just boop. Yeah, Echo's normally required to get through the Spike Breaker room, but using the precise position I was in and wing smashing through it, we were able to do it blind. Didn't need the Echo at all. Here, I'm equipping the Spike Breaker armor because it breaks all these spikes in this room here. That's what it's used for. This area, casually, you can't get through without the Spike Breaker. If you use potions and some invincibility frame abuse, you're able to get through there, but we don't allow that for this category. And there's the silver ring. With both the silver and gold rings, you go back to the clock room, and you wear both of those rings, and it opens up a secret area that gives you, and then Maria gives you the holy glasses. You use those to fight Richter, but then you end up saving him, and you go on to the second castle. So, because I've done all the relic checks, at this point I know that there's only one relic that I need in order to beat the game. I have all the items that I need to beat the game. I have enough items to do damage and all that, so at this point all I have on my mind is acquire the holy glasses and acquire the very last relic that I need. This is a section that I would usually very much enjoy having another library card, but because it avoids having to deal with this this statue being opened or closed by the time you're done with this section. So once you grab the holy glasses, and if you don't have a library card, you have to go back to the teleporter in Olrox's quarters, but if you miss the cycle, you're going to be waiting like close to a minute. So it's usually very useful to have a library card handy instead, but I already had used mine, so. Yeah, here I'm skipping pretty much most every item check and everything else that I would have done earlier, or if I didn't have the duplicator plus buffalo stars, so. Like, even late into the game, it can be useful to do certain item checks if they're very, very close, because there is a chance that what you'll find is the duplicator. The duplicator is pretty much the end-all, be-all, like, most useful item to find in a randomizer run, for the most part. There, I re-equipped the duplicator, because if I didn't have it equipped, I would use my buffalo stars and then run out, and then not be able to use them anymore, which would be very sad. Here I have to wait for the statue to open. Thankfully it was only about 10 seconds, so it's worth it to wait. If I had to wait the full minute, what I would end up doing is leaving this area to the right and going through the marble gallery all the way to the outer wall. But at that point, it's just bad. You're just losing time. It's unfortunate. This is just one of those areas that you really do want to have a library card for. In general, like a randomizer run, you want to get lucky enough to have at least 2 library cards. This run only had 1. There are very many runs that you have where you just never find any library cards, and that's pretty unfortunate. Oh man. This sword guy has just been giving me trouble this entire seed. He's just bad luck, I guess. But yeah, now we're just going to use this teleport to Castle Keep, which is where the Richter boss fight is, and progress into the second castle. From here, we do a quick summon spirit into Soul Steel. The shaft orb that controls Richter and basically acts as a blocking you from entering the second castle. It has 10 HP, and every hit in the game only does 1 HP, 1 hit of damage to it. So any attack you do to it, it's going to require 10 hits. So doing the summon spirit into the Soul Steel is exactly 10 hits, and it's one of the quicker ways to do it. Without requiring any other kind of items. If you had something like Chrysogram or Vorpal Blade, you can just spam those at it, and it's usually faster. But if you have enough MP, it's usually worth going for. Here, I go out of my way to check and see how many relics I need left to collect. I think I wasn't using a tracker, so I just wanted to double check. So I'm now knowing that I only need 1 more relic left. So there are 7 relics available in the second castle. And those relics drop from certain bosses, and there are 2 that are just out in specific areas for you to acquire. This is one of the bosses, Darkwing Bat. So I'm going to stand up on this ledge and wait to see what the relic is, and if it's a relic I need, I grab it. If not, I just leave. The route that I take here allows for the most amount of relics to be acquired as quickly, like with the least amount of downtime as possible. There is one downside to this route, though, is that the relic that is behind Creature is saved for last, and it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and basically grabbing the Creature relic is very, very slow, and you never really want to do it. But there is a chance, a 1 in 7 chance, now a 1 in 6 chance, that the relic is the relic behind the Creature fight. And now it's a 1 in 5 chance. So the more you end up not seeing the relic, the more scared you get that it ends up being a Creature seed, and then it ends up just being really slow because it's the last one you end up checking. So in situations like this, which are quite common, it just becomes a crapshoot as to where the relic is. if you're in a race scenario, you could go and take a overall slower route, because most racers are going to take the route that I'm taking here. This is like statistically the better route. You get the most amount of relic checks in the shorter amount of time. But if you're racing somebody and you want to gamble that it's at creature, you know they're going to check creature last, so you go there pretty much first to check and see if it's there. And if it is there, you have a huge advantage. So that's like one of the tactics that can be employed in a race. Yep, this is Akmadon. You throw holy water at him and he dies. I threw a couple of Buffalo Stars for good measure. If you don't kill him quickly though, he does do a lot of stuff. He fills the screen with like poison gas, and if he grabs you, he like swings you around and throws you. It's pretty bad. He does a ton of damage too. Okay, it wasn't a relic I was looking for, so I leave. So at this point, you would prefer for the first 3 relics to have one of those first 3 relics to have been the relic you needed, because we're pretty much all of this movement that we've done so far is kind of required to get to the clock room, the inverted clock room, which is where you need to go to fight the final boss. But because I'm still waiting on that relic, I just open a teleporter here to come back to later once I do find that relic. So most of the time what separates a very good seed, like a very, very fast seed, from a very, very slow seed is just dependent on how quickly you acquire the bat relic at the beginning of the run, and also how quickly you acquire the last of the Vlad relics. Those are usually the 2 determining factors. Because the bat gives you like super fast movement, faster than pretty much everything else that you can do in the game. So if you don't get bat until very late into the first castle, which in logic it is required to be in the first castle, they don't have bat in the second castle, even though technically you can finish seeds without bat being in the first castle, or without acquiring bat whatsoever, and you can finish seeds glitchless. The developer decided that'd be pretty mean, especially for speedruns. So it's required to be in the first castle. And then there are certain seeds that just, you're in the second castle for a very, very long time, just searching for that last relic. So here's another instance of a save split coming up here. You can save before this relic check, because it's kind of far out of the way, and there's a save room right next to it. It's also pretty difficult to maneuver through, so just in general it ends up being faster to just save and then reload the save if it's not what you're looking for. Having some trouble moving here, it looks like. Here I don't want to re-menu, because opening this area, that secret, you can do with a sword, but I don't want to re-equip the sword, since I only have Buffalo Stars equipped to do damage, and the Buffalo Stars can't reach up there, so. So I go over here to do the relic check. It is the Tooth of Vlad. That is the last relic that I need. So I don't end up using that save split, and I just leave the way that I came. So if that wasn't the last relic, the route you would do from here is you would go farther to the right in the inverted caverns, fight Death, acquire the relic from him. Then you would fight Galamoth, because there is a relic that's behind the Galamoth fight. It doesn't drop from Galamoth, but there's an area past Galamoth where there is a relic for you to collect. And then if all else fails and it's not behind Galamoth, then you teleport out of the underground caverns, teleport back to the center of the map, and then you retrack a lot of your steps to go find creature, fight creature, and then if it is creature, then you have to teleport again. It's a whole ordeal. Or you don't have to teleport again, but you would have to fly through the inverted marble gallery like for a third time, so it's quite a ways out of the way. You usually hope that it's not a creature seed, but even with all of the worst luck possible, like very, very slow start, and like having to retrace a lot of your steps and backtrack, the slowest seed I think I've ever experienced was only about an hour and 25 minutes. And that's like a worst case scenario seed with very bad items, very bad relic placements, and all of that. Here I'm optimizing my menus for damage now that I don't need the mana prisms, so I equipped a cross shuriken as my secondary. And then, yeah. So that way I can throw both cross shurikens and buffalo stars as opposed to just buffalo stars. There's a screen limit of only 3 items on the screen for buffalo stars and cross shurikens each. Buffalo stars do slightly more damage than cross shurikens, but they're essentially like the same kind of item. So this will allow for 6 items on the screen at once to do damage as opposed to just 3 in each hand. So I just mash the 2 buttons, and I'm able to kill Shaft very, very quickly. And yeah, that's the SotN randomizer for the most part. Obviously not every seed is going to look like this, and there's a ton of different possibilities, even when racing, because this has become very popular amongst the SotN community for races. A lot of people have found very different strategies to go through different areas and to try and, you know, check as many things as possible. Some players like to take more risks other than others, and it's honestly become one of my favorite ways to play through the game now. Having played through vanilla so many times, now we have a randomizer that's very, very robust and very fun to play through, so yeah, it's exciting. The final time there was 55 minutes and 37 seconds. I know I didn't have the timer up on screen, but yeah, it was a good seed, and it was a pretty average seed overall actually, but it was fun, and it was a pretty, I would say, good showing of what a randomizer run can be. There's so many different options and permutations that can come of randomizer runs. So anyways, thank you for your time, and yeah, thank you.